Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to our channel. Today we have a battle of the Tudor Pelagos against the Rolex Submariner. Base metals, black on black, like against like. Can Tudor dethrone the crown? Let's find out. We start with the Tudor Pelagos. Always living somewhat in the shadow of its more famous stablemate, the Black Bay, the Pelagos has been around just as long. Launched in 2012 alongside the Black Bay, the more capable, deluxe, and impressively equipped Pelagos has always lived in the shadow not just of the Black Bay, but of Rolex's Submariner. This watch exists in a sort of commercial netherworld. Tremendous capability, but I'm not sure who the constituent is for all of that tech. Let's talk about the fit, because that's what really defines it in relation to the Submariner. The Pelagos is a bigger watch, albeit one crafted from grade 2 titanium rather than the Rolex's 904 steel. You can see, and we'll zoom out a little bit more, on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, the Pelagos is an easy watch to wear. It is not just a watch that can rival the Submariner for capability. It should be noted that this watch is the heir to the Tudor Submariner, which was phased out during the late 1990s in favor of the Hydronaut and then the Hydronaut 2, and the Hydronaut 2 gave way to the Pelagos in 2012. 42 millimeters, the watch is easy to wear and tie and hypoallergenic, so if you have a nickel allergy, this is the one to pick. Lug to lug, the watch is a very reasonable 49.7 millimeters, and on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, it's nicely constrained. I can recommend this watch for a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference. It is far thicker than the Rolex, and the watches have only got chunkier as the in-house calibers have arrived. The in-house caliber arriving in the Pelagos for 2015. Now a 14.4 millimeter thick watch. We'll compare it side to side against the Rolex in a moment. The spacing between the lugs is 22 millimeters, so though the watch does have a few vintage cues, it's very much a modern watch. It's not the retro tribute that the Black Bay is, and it has a nicely planted broad stance on the wrist. The watch does come with accessory straps, so in addition to the titanium, you get the advantage of other options for appearance and function. The links are fixed by screws. The clasp itself features a clamshell. You can see internally ceramic pin snaps to maintain the tolerance over time. This ensures that the system will not lose its crisp fit and function over time because the titanium cannot aggress against the ceramic pin snaps, and you can see they're external as well as internal on the clasp. Now there is an interesting architecture here whereby you have a couple of anchoring points. You have those 3 anchoring points at the bottom, and if you want you can revert to the lowest position or anchor at any of those 3 stations. But once you pull past a point, the pressure of the water is designed to allow this bracelet to float freely as the water expands and contracts your wrist. So the pressure will change the size of your wrist, and the clasp, which is spring-loaded, will change size to suit your wrist. Now there is a traditional all-or-nothing fold-out clasp built in. You can see even that uses ceramic pin snaps, so there's quite a good deal of adjustability built into this clasp. Jumping back to the case, you can see a few nods to history. There was a time in the Tudor Submariner era, before the 90s, right up until the late 80s, when Tudor and Rolex cases were shared. So a sub was a sub, and they always had beveled lugs. Those are gone on the modern day sub, and you can see that to good effect as I display the super case profile. It's squared off at its edges. There is no taper. But of course Tudor a bit more nostalgic, giving you a machine executed bevel. You can see that the crown guards recall the pointy crown guard era of the Submariner, so another nod to history. But as you turn the watch over, you start to see things get very modern very quickly. The micro knurling of the bezel makes it very easy to grip with wet, sweaty or gloved hands, and you'll note, unlike the Black Bay, which features anodized aluminum inserts, here you do get a true ceramic insert. Now, outboard, all is modern. With the ceramic insert, highly scratch resistant, things get nostalgic again inboard, where you can see that the dial features cutouts for block indices that recall the late 60s to mid 70s Tudor Submariner snowflakes, and you can actually see the same form in the hand profile. That's really the only vintage nostalgic touch on the dial, as everything else is very modern. There's a flange or rayhot sloping down from the bezel to the dial base. You can see that there's a faceted aperture for the date. You can see that the watch is a certified chronometer, 500 meters water resistant, and on the 9 o'clock side of the watch there is a helium escape valve, giving the watch almost sea dweller-like capability with a matte base. You will note that unlike the Black Bay, which features the Tudor shield logo on the dial, and then it features the rose logo on the crown. Here it's a double shield. The dial cloaks a manufacturer caliber MT5612, 70-hour power reserve, COSC chronometer, full balance bridge with a free sprung index, but a silicon escape wheel, balance spring that allows the watch to be robustly anti-magnetic. The escapement is very tough, being free sprung with a full balance bridge, and it beats away at 28,800 vibrations per hour, but again, 70-hour power reserve, helping to explain the watch's sheer girth. Now, jumping over to the Submariner, you can see first and foremost, I may as well just go side to side, the sub is considerably thinner, 12.6 millimeters thick versus 14.4. There's no mistaking which is the more compact and elegant watch. Now, the sub itself is evergreen. Buyers of the original Submariner references in 1953 would have recognized this watch as a descendant of theirs. So the Pelagos is a combination of modern and retro, whereas the sub is evergreen. It's never been out of production. It's never had to be revived. So it's simply a continuation of well-established design norms. On my 16-centimeter circumference wrist, it's easy to wear. 40 millimeters, 12.6 millimeters thick, 20 millimeter spacing between the lugs. Zoom out a little bit more so you can see it in relation to my whole arm. You'll appreciate the fact that lug-to-lug, the watch is relatively well constrained. 48.2 millimeters, and if you include the solid end links, it's only 51.1 millimeters, so still very reasonable. The timepiece is comfortable, it fits well, and I can recommend it for a wrist as small as 13.5 to 14 centimeters in circumference. The clasp and the bracelet are redoubtable pieces. Now, the Rolex in steel, despite being a smaller watch, does feel more substantial in the hand because of the use of steel. 904L steel, of course, highly anti-corrosive, but then again, so is titanium. The timepiece featuring a double lock. There is a beacon hook system internally, and that beacon hook will keep the clasp closed. Even if you pull up on it, you can't open it up. So the clamshell doesn't lock it, it double seals it. Jumping internally, you can see that there is a glide lock system, so 2 millimeters of incremental adjustment step by step over a full travel of 20 millimeters. So you have 20 millimeters of adjustment in 2 millimeter increments, those 10 different steps, giving you quite a few options. Appreciate the fact that there are half links included in the bracelet, and then you have a bunch of additional removable links featuring screws to set them. So it's a high-grade clasp with a lot of adjustability. It's just not quite as sophisticated, nor does it give you quite as much extension as the Pelagos. The Rolex case is strong. It's also simple. There's not a whole lot to it. You can see the crown guard profile is rounded off and modern, no nods to pointy crown vintage watches here. The side is anything but nostalgic. It's brutal, it's contemporary, it's distinctive, and it's a like it or leave it design. If you're a Rolex classicist, you probably leave it. If you're into everything that is modern Rolex, you're probably into the severity of the super case, as well as the fact that it makes this 40 millimeter watch look like a 42 on the wrist. The bezel quality is excellent. 120 click and very precise. You can place this bezel precisely where you like. The knurling is deep and sharp. It's a pleasure to grip. You can easily imagine manipulating that bezel with wet, sweaty, or gloved hands. Now, let's quickly talk about the feel and sound of the Tudor bezel. It might be a bit louder, but the feeling of the detent isn't nearly as precise, nor is it as satisfying. It feels like the detent in a Rolex GMT rather than the crisp, sharp micro report of the Submariner. Dial-wise, you can see that the sub uses a gloss base with white gold hands and white gold appliques, so while it doesn't have quite the depth of the Pelagos, it does feature superior materials. Inside the case, Rolex caliber 3131, a COSC chronometer, it's true, and it's also a 48-hour automatic full balance bridge with a free sprung index. It uses an antimagnetic alloy, Cerachrom blue, niobium zirconium blue oxidized rather than the silicon in the Tudor. And of course it features quick set, date, and hacking seconds, as does the Tudor, but no helium escape valve and 300 meters water resistant. Let's talk about the sub's advantages. First thing, Rolex can rightly claim to be the king among watches, the ultimate watch brand, at least in the public's imagination in terms of status and stature. And among Rolex watches, the sub is the Rolex. It's the icon of icons. I will also mention that it is legitimately timeless. This is not a voguish watch. This is not a fashion-first timepiece in the sense that it doesn't follow trends. It looks recognizably like the 1953 original, and in the year 2053, this will still be recognizable as the Submariner. Submariner. So in that sense, true, it's a status symbol, but there is something real and enduring about the style of this watch, completely apart and detached from status. It's simply a great design. 5-year warranty versus 2-year warranty. Rolex gives you 5 years. Tudor gives you 2 years. That's a big deal, especially considering you could potentially send this watch for a warranty claim after 4 years and 11 months if it's not keeping Rolex's promised precision of -2 + 2 seconds or better. That's right, Rolex attests to precision. And putting your money where your mouth is, giving you a half-decade warranty and a precision claim is a great way to have someone send in their watch for a quick touch-up and overhaul just before the warranty expires half a decade from now. That's a wonderful luxury that you do not get with the Tudor. Advantage Rolex on that front. The bezel is incomparably superior. It feels better, it sounds better, it just is better. It's more refined. It was better by design. There was no way Rolex was going to let Tudor one-up it on that count. It's also important to note that it is more compact and more elegant. When you poise these watches side to side or crystal to crystal, you can really see just how much more trim and tidy the Rolex is, especially in terms of thickness. I would also mention that if you're going to give one of these watches as a rather rich gift, and it does happen, give the Rolex. It's the certain way to please the recipient, because everyone loves Rolex, or at least the idea of Rolex, and when they picture a Rolex, they probably picture a sub, whereas most folks who don't have specific interest in watches probably don't know Tudor, and as a unisex gift, this one isn't nearly as appropriate for a very small wrist. So as a gift, advantage Rolex. I'll also mention that the clasp adjustments, the 10 different detents and stops, does make this system easier and more intuitive to adjust than the multifaceted and layered adjustments of the Tudor clasp. So this gives you more real adjustability. The Tudor relies heavily on spring-loaded adjustments that occur naturally. I'd rather be in control. So on that basis, advantage Rolex. It's important to note that money matters. We don't keep all of our watches forever, and this is a remarkable store of value. If you buy it at the retail price of $8,550, right now these are selling pre-owned from about $10,750 to about $11,500 if you get one with most of the warranty intact, all boxes, papers, receipts, and invoices. So this is a timepiece that offers an immense amount of appeal. It's not just a status symbol. The sub could be chosen on merits. Let's talk about the advantages of the Tudor. The Tudor has a lot of them. It is a better buy used. Do you want to buy that $11,500 sub pre-owned, or do you want to buy this for $3,000? That's a no-brainer. If you phrase the question in such a fashion, you could buy this and buy a small collection of other watches alongside it for the price of a pre-owned sub 116610. This Tudor is a great pre-owned buy. I'll also mention that it comes with accessory straps, so you get a couple of different bands to throw on the watch for no additional cost. I happen to like the rubber version that's included. It's comfortable and it looks sporty on this titanium case. It's probably the most suited if you don't want to go with the bracelet, but go with the bracelet, because this is a timepiece that features a clasp that is better overall. The clasp gives you many degrees of adjustment. You have the 3 different stops, you have the extensible spring-loaded system, and then you have the fold-out. So if you want sheer capability as opposed to simple ease of adjustment, this clasp does give you more capability. In terms of legibility, a watch is designed to be well watched. This is an easier watch to read in day or night compared to the Rolex, which has smaller indices, smaller hands, and less lume. As a watch, advantage Tudor. More capable overall. 500 meters rather than 300, helium escape valve rather than none, 70-hour power reserve versus 48, and a true amagnetic silicon hairspring versus antimagnetic alloy. Capability is on the Tudor side. I'll also mention that the muted satin finish, though on a watch with a few nostalgic nods, somehow feels more 2019 than the big bling, highly polished look of the Rolex, which I feel is still a little too rooted in the previous decade. It looks good. In full satin, I think it would look better. And on that count, the Tudor thrives and succeeds. Finally, I'm going to mention that this watch has a remarkably deep dial. The closer you get, the more impressed you become. I don't necessarily think you need to aggressively advertise the watch to the person who's already bought it. Like Rolex, there's just too much text on this dial. But look at that flange. Look how it's notched. Look how the indices themselves are actually solid blocks of superluminova rather than painted or printed features. This is an applique dial with incredible depth, a handsome notched ray haut, and you really can follow this one all the way down from the bezel, sloping down to the base of the date disc. It's simply a more complex dial, even if the Rolex features better materials overall. So, in total, which of these watches do I prefer? Well, there's just no contest. For almost 1/4 the price pre-owned, I'm going with the Pelagos. More capability, understated appearance, an underdog brand compared to Rolex at least, a more capable all-around clasp, the accessory straps, a better value proposition. Even if you buy the watch new for $4,450, you're getting what you pay for. So on that basis, I'm going with Tudor. You might go with Rolex. There's no doubt which one is the timeless icon and which one is a bit of an upstart Johnny-come-lately style-wise. But if I'm going to spend my money, I'm spending it on the Tudor. You guys let me know in the box below which one you would make yours. I promised you that the Tudor would win the Lume test, and you can see not only is it more legible about its dial, but the fully lumed, fully mobile diving bezel on the Tudor owns the Rolex's single luminescent pearl. So on this basis, advantage Pelagos.